Welcome to Nacht Stories. I invite you to sit back and enjoy these eerie and uncanny tales. Deep in the heart of the northern Minnesota wilderness, a group of hikers, Lily, Mark, Sean, and Jessica, set off on a weekend trip through the dense woods surrounding Lake Superior. The air was crisp, and the trees whispered in the wind, their branches swaying like old friends in a quiet conversation. As they hiked deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon an old cabin, abandoned but oddly well preserved. It was tucked behind a thick layer of pine trees, hidden from the usual trails. There were no signs of recent human activity, yet something about the cabin felt out of place, like it didn't belong there. Lily, always curious, pushed open the creaky door. Inside, dust coated the furniture, and the faint scent of mildew filled the air. But what caught their attention was a leather-bound notebook lying on a small wooden desk, as though someone had just left it there. Jessica opened it and began reading aloud the faded handwriting. "I hear them at night, soft whispers between the trees. They tell me to leave, but I can't. I won't. I don't know why, but I think I'm being watched. The last entry was dated 10 years ago. That's creepy," Sean muttered, glancing around. "Who would leave a notebook like that?" The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the cabin. As the group decided to camp nearby, Jessica could swear she heard whispers carried by the wind. She dismissed it as the trees rustling, but Mark, normally skeptical, looked uneasy. That night, as they lay in their tents, the whispers grew louder. It wasn't the wind. The voices were distinct, close, and urgent. "Get out!" the words repeated, growing more insistent. Sean's voice cracked as he called out, "Who's there?" The whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Lily unzipped her tent and stepped out into the cold air. In the distance, the outline of the cabin was barely visible, but there, in the window, stood a figure, tall, pale and motionless, staring into the dark woods. Jessica gasped, "We need to leave, now." In a frenzy, they packed their things and rushed back to their cars. But when they passed the cabin, it was gone, replaced by an empty, overgrown patch of land, as if it had never been there at all. The next day the group returned, hoping they had imagined it all. The forest was as thick as ever, but there was no trace of the cabin, not even a single footprint in the earth. And as they left the woods, they noticed something chilling. Each of them had forgotten a part of the night. Mark couldn't remember what he had seen through the window. Sean couldn't recall hearing the whispers, and Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching her all along. 2. The Lantern in the Mist. Elias, an old woodsman, had lived alone in his cabin, nestled deep in the forests of Wisconsin, for as long as anyone could remember. The locals would speak of him in whispers, telling stories of how he never left the woods, as if he had become one with them. But Elias always kept to himself. He preferred the company of the trees and the creatures of the forest over people. One evening in early autumn, as Elias checked his traps near the edge of the forest, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the landscape. The trees, usually tall and imposing, were swallowed by the mist, and the air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine. That's when he saw it, a faint, bobbing light in the distance. At first he thought it might be a fellow woodsman, but as he walked closer, he realized the light was hovering just above the ground, moving slowly through the fog. The light was too steady to be a lantern carried by a person. It flickered like a flame, yet it didn't cast any shadow. Curious, Elias followed it, his boots crunching softly on the damp leaves beneath him. The light led him deeper into the woods, far beyond where he'd ever ventured before. The trees around him grew taller and stranger, their branches twisting in unnatural directions as if they were reaching out to touch him. The air grew colder, and Elias began to feel an unsettling chill creeping up his spine. Finally, the light stopped in a small clearing where the fog hung thick like a shroud. In the center stood a figure cloaked in shadow, with only the faintest glimmer of pale skin visible beneath the hood. It was unnaturally tall, too tall to be human, and it stood motionless, facing the trees. Elias stepped forward, drawn to it by some invisible force. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face. His face. But it wasn't his face as he knew it. It was pale, gaunt, and twisted in a silent scream, its hollow eyes staring into his soul. The lantern flickered out, plunging the clearing into darkness. Elias froze, unable to move, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure raised a long, bony hand and pointed toward the trees, silently urging him to follow. But Elias knew better than to listen. As the fog thickened and the darkness closed in around him, he turned and ran. When he finally made it back to his cabin, breathless and shaken, he found the door wide open, the interior cold and empty. The next morning, when the fog lifted, Elias went back to the spot. But there was no clearing, no figure, no lantern, only the endless, quiet forest, whispering with the voices of the wind. 3. The frozen footprints. Anna and Mike had been planning this winter getaway for months. They rented a cabin on the edge of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, far from civilization, to enjoy some peace and quiet in the snow-covered woods. It was a dream come true, until the morning they woke up to a strange sight. Fresh, deep footprints were leading away from the cabin, cutting through the untouched snow like a trail in a dream. The footprints were perfectly human-sized, and they didn't belong to either of them. But who else could have been out there? They hadn't heard anyone the night before. Mike was the first to suggest they follow the trail. "Maybe it's a neighbor," he said, although he knew no one lived nearby. Anna, nervous but intrigued, agreed. As they trudged through the deep snow, the tracks seemed to lead them farther into the woods, into unfamiliar territory. The trees grew denser, casting long shadows on the snow. The footprints led to a frozen pond, its surface glistening in the weak morning light. Then Anna saw it, a face beneath the ice. She stopped dead in her tracks, a chill creeping up her spine. It was a woman's face, eyes wide and staring, frozen in place. Anna gasped, but Mike seemed unfazed. "It's probably just a reflection," he muttered, though his voice faltered. But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The pond's surface looked smooth, untouched, but as they edged closer, the ice cracked beneath Mike's feet. With a sharp cry, he plunged into the freezing water. Anna screamed, reaching for him, but the ice was too thick. She tried to pull him up, but he was gone, swallowed by the black depths below. Desperate, Anna turned to leave, but when she looked back at the tracks, they had changed. The footprints no longer led back to the cabin. Instead, they were filled with something darker than snow. Dried blood streaked across the white landscape. When she made it back to the cabin, she was alone. The sheriff found her the next day, pale and shaken. But there was no sign of Mike, no footprints, and no trace of the pond. Just endless snow. The old watchtower, the northern forests of Minnesota, are vast and wild, a place where the untamed wilderness stretches on for miles. But there is one structure that stands out. A stone watchtower, forgotten by most, standing like a sentinel over the woods. It was once used to spot forest fires, but after the last crew mysteriously vanished, it was abandoned, left to the elements. Sarah, Tom, Alicia, and Derek, 4 adventurous friends, had heard the stories from locals. They didn't believe the tales of haunted towers and ghostly figures, but curiosity drove them to explore. The sun was setting when they arrived at the base of the tower, its silhouette looming against the orange sky. The stone walls were covered in ivy, and the door creaked as they pushed it open. The interior was dark, filled with dust and cobwebs, but there was a strange aura about the place, a sense that time had stopped. Tom climbed the rickety ladder up to the top, his flashlight illuminating the view. The entire forest stretched out before him, a sprawling sea of green. But something caught his eye, a shadow moving between the trees, flickering like a dark figure. "Hey, guys, you have to see this," Tom called, but no one responded. He turned back to the ladder, but it was gone, replaced by a blank wall of stone. Panic set in as the others searched for him. As they reached the top of the tower, they saw the last thing they expected: Tom, standing motionless in the center of the clearing, his face pale and expressionless. "Tom?" Alicia called out, but he didn't respond. That's when they saw it. Around Tom, shadowy figures emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. They were watching him, waiting. The wind picked up and a bell began to toll, a low, mournful sound that seemed to come from nowhere. Before anyone could react, the shadows moved and Tom was gone, vanished into the woods. The friends scrambled to get back down, but when they reached the ground, the ladder had disappeared, and the forest around them had grown thick with fog. And in the distance, the bell tolled again. 5. The missing creek, the Adirondacks, are known for their rugged beauty and wild, untamed landscapes, but one of its most eerie features is the creek that appears and disappears without warning. For decades, locals have spoken of its strange power, how it vanishes for years, only to reappear without explanation. Grace, a geologist from New York, had heard the stories and thought they were nothing but tall tales. She was determined to find the creek herself. Armed with maps and her keen scientific mind, she ventured deep into the forest. After days of searching, Grace finally stumbled upon it, a small, babbling creek flowing through the woods, its water clear and cool. It seemed ordinary enough, but as she knelt to study the water, she realized something odd. The creek was vanishing, slowly receding into the earth, as if it were being swallowed whole. By nightfall, the creek had disappeared entirely, leaving only bare earth where it had once flowed. Grace felt a chill run down her spine, but she shrugged it off, telling herself it was just a natural phenomenon. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, she woke to find her journal missing. In its place was a single, unfamiliar page. The writing was hers, but the date was from the future, and the entry was chilling. "I don't know how long I've been here. The creek is gone, but it's not just the water, it's everything. I hear footsteps behind me, but no one is there. The trees have stopped talking, and I'm not sure what is real anymore. The creek has taken me." The last line was scratched out, replaced by, "I hear the water again." When the search party found her belongings days later, there was no sign of Grace. Only the creek, silent, still, and waiting. Thank you for joining me for our nocturnal tales. I'll hope to see you again and wish you all a good night.